So faculty, there's myself teaching also design. Joanna Grant, who I'm not sure is with us in this session. She and Jimenez Lai have been teaching design alongside the team this year. Ismail Soto teaching design and computer graphics and knowledge. He's been fantastic too. Pavel Getov, been teaching for many years with us. As Izzy, design and practice. Teddy Slowick also doing the same. Hey, Teddy, teaching design and practice with the group. And Fabio Zangoli teaches structures. And Sarah Hearn and Tina Sorio have been teaching history theory. So it's a team effort. And we work pretty synergistically, I like to believe. This is our 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. group. I believe Electric Harris may show up at some point. She's here. Yes. Good friend. I was just about to introduce, yeah, so Lisa Iwamoto Scott, professor at UC Berkeley. Thomas Kelly of, looks like your thing got cut there. Norman Kelly from Illinois. It's Chicago. Also Jose Parral from Woodbury in San Diego, and Zara Safedverdi now teaching as assistant professor at Texas Tech. All right, and we have 4 students, Edwinson, Ella, Jiwon, and Galen Onping. So just to kind of give you, you can see my screen, yes?
No, we're looking at you though.
Oh, well, you know, sorry. There we go.
There we go.
Now you can see my screen. Yeah, we had some tech issues. All right, so this is where we started the year. We started the year with a low-rise competition, which was here in Los Angeles, organized by Christopher Hawthorne. We did receive honorable mentions from our faculty, Joanna and Jimenez, received honorable mention in the subdivision category, and our student, Erica David, received honorable mention in redistribution. There were like 400 applicants to this. So we did this little low-rise competition. It was just an investigation of how you could design low-rise buildings in Los Angeles. Some maybe problematic winners, but we'll just move on. We then moved to what we typically do in our class. We have an architectural project that looks at form, it looks at computer solid modeling, and creating sort of spaces in between that then help the students to develop an individual language for their work. We also had a building program that's actually quite small for this studio. It's 210,000 square feet. It's a low-rise building. And it's a multi-income housing, hotels with a boutique and transient component, social and health services, and creative office retail spaces as well. There's a large public interior and exterior urban spaces in between those programs. Urban spaces in between those programs, that's really part of the design. You can hear me now. So 200,000, I'm gonna go faster. 210,000 square foot building, 60,000 square feet of public commercial space, 50,000 square feet of flexible office space, and then there's 100,000 square feet of housing and hotel, a fairly small transient hotel and boutique hotel alongside multi-income housing of all levels, including transitional family. And then 50% of the program, basically another 210,000 square feet, is devoted to public urban space, and then parking's underground. I think some of you are moving. So this is our site. It's in Echo Park, near Echo Park Lake, on the corner here of Echo Park and Sunset Boulevard. This gives you an idea visually. It's a 4-story building that we're putting in, a fairly low-rise community, 3-story, 4 stories max, 45 feet. So trying to create more of a landscape. And this kind of gives you an idea of the square footage of the lot, where effectively there were a couple of buildings on the lot and an old Walgreens and something we were starting fresh. So it's a 300 by 325 foot lot, about 110,000 square foot program, 4 stories high, gives us 50% porosity with our 210,000 square foot building. So things to just keep in mind, we're looking at spaces in between, we're looking at the architectural concept, urban concepts, and a socio-political programmatic concept. And I am now going to stop, and we're gonna go to our first student who's hopefully internet's better than mine.
Indeed, hopefully. Okay, so I will be sharing my screen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edwinson Chan. So the project that that I'm sharing today, I've named Vaulted Convergence. The reason why I've named it this is very simple. It is because in this project, I wanted to explore the idea of the arch and the vault. How can I create experiences with this form factor? The idea would be that within my design, I would be able to create a sort of bridge, a bridging between all users, depending on how they experience the space itself. So as a result, I wanted to create this sort of community hub for everyone for all the people of Echo Park. I wanted to be able to have a place for everyone to be able to come in together. Sorry, give me a quick second. I'm just having major hiccups right now. But yeah, essentially, how I sort of approach this is that because it's right next to more of the major landmarks, as well as a major artery of Los Angeles, Sunset Boulevard specifically, I approached it so that how do I create a very porous project? And I approached it by looking into the arch, in that how I can most likely cut into a more major form. As you could probably see from this site plan, is that where a lot of the building itself looks very solid. However, from plan, we have a lot more openness, more porosity into the center. On the ground floor here, specifically in creating this sort of community hub, I come up with this idea of an anti-amphitheater, in that there is a space for the citizens and the users to come together and to converge onto this sort of public square that allows for a place for public speaking. However, it does not necessarily retain that form of an amphitheater itself. Now, also on the first floor, close to the bottom here, is a public market that would be a connection to the Echo Park Farmers Market. In my personal experience of that farmers market, it did not feel centralized, and I wanted to be able to bring more of that space out for people to be able to for vendors to be able to use. And that market extends out onto the second floor, which also opens up into a more permanent market location, so that the citizens will not have to be able to rely simply on the farmers market for all of their produce as well as pharmaceutical needs. And also on the property is a 2-story food hall closer to the back end. Within that food hall area, there is also a larger open plaza area to allow for regional food trucks to come in and host various events as well. It's quite empty, so I do apologize for that. However, as one of the more major pieces of this project is a boutique hotel, which is sort of cantilevered / suspended across this large, across one large mass by itself. Yeah, so I will go through some of the sections. So as you can see, a lot of this, the anti-amphitheater comes down into the ground as a means of keeping that sort of ground plane to be unobstructed, to allow for more of this open, inviting space when you're on street level. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all the comments that I have. So yeah, that is my project.
Edwinson, can you cycle back or put up your thumbnails?
Sure. Oh, okay. To which one specifically?
I was thinking just a thumbnail so we could see it more comfortably.
Sure. Sorry about that.
Or you could maybe just leave it here. I think that's
Okay, sure.
So you had began the project talking about how you wanted to use vaults or arches, rather, as the means to, you know, how they could support and foster the social agenda, the urbanistic agenda, and so on. Can you speak a little bit more to that and how that happened, how you did that?
So in a way, I wanted to be able to have it so that the experience of the building itself is more of an exploration, where it's not necessarily particularly saying, oh, this space was designed with a particular person in mind, but rather it is supposed to be like, you know, the experience in itself should is taken away depending on the person that is experiencing it. I don't necessarily believe that I designed this in a way that divides people necessarily, but instead to create that sense of exploration.
And maybe go to the renderings again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. This is, yeah. I mean, personally, I think what's working well in the project is the plan and the stacking up of all the disparate pieces that you have. So rather than a single monolithic building, what I understand from your, if you go back to the plan again, sorry, or maybe that 3D, the composite view is the easiest, where you have more than one image on a page, not this one, where you have more than one image on a page. Yeah, maybe this one. So yeah, in the upper left there, I think what I'm seeing is that it's sort of like a collection of parts, a collection of pieces, building pieces that get stitched together with a very open ground plane and open from above. So it looks like a collection of elements, which I think in the massing works quite well, both in the context and also with the idea of this very porous and open center and being able to get access to it. Mm-hmm. I think where the project starts to lose me a little bit is actually in the vaulting and the arching and the things that I'm seeing more in elevation, which starts to become very dominant and hegemonic almost, you know, like overriding the individual pieces. And not that I think this should look like 12 buildings. I think it should look like one project. But you know, it's a really big project to try to fenestrate and to try to articulate. But to me, the articulation is not supporting, I think, what I'm seeing in the urban design that you have, which is a series of unique pieces that come together around open space.
Yeah. So yeah, I would definitely say that, like, you know, I sort of approached the rest of this project from that midpoint, thinking, like, you know, could it be more of this sort of, like, you know, a collection of pieces rather than just a singular mass that is very much the same throughout, which is why, like, you know, when you look at the offices, they vary drastically. Like, you know, the space looks quite drastically different from, let's say, the interiors of the housing circulation or even the hotel circulation. Because I wanted to create, like, you know, unique experiences throughout the project, not necessarily saying to just, you know, keep the same experience in, you know, all together. You know what I mean?
No.
No. Okay. So, I mean, essentially, the idea would be that, like, you know, it's not necessarily that, you know, you would feel the same as you would feel in the offices, as you would feel if you were in as someone coming to the market, let's say. In that, you know, because you'd be experiencing, like, you know, what spaces the offices would be offering in the first place. In that, how, if I come back to the plan, as you, the offices here are more of the spaces are blocked up a little bit more, just so that, like, how should I say, the corridors themselves are a lot more curvilinear than they are with, like, instead of the growing vaulting that you would see in the market spaces as such. But in itself, it's supposed to be able to allow users to see exactly, you know, to experience something a little bit different than the regular people of occupying the space, if you will.
Yeah, I guess I think that that's what wants to get investigated more. If you go back to like their composite page, you know, what I'm seeing here is that the vaults and the arches, like they operate at one scale. In other words, they operate the scale of a single floor, whether they're a window or an arcade, for example. And to me, there seems to be a real opportunity to think about that type of, it's not really, I don't think you're using it structurally, honestly. You're using it more as like a applique almost, you know, onto like these more traditionally floor slab buildings. But I think that there's an opportunity here to really think about them as a language that can speak to the different programs that you have. So in order to do that, I'll just throw out an example, which is you might have a 4-story high arch or vault or something, which speaks to the publicness, let's say, of moving in through the street edge to the amphitheater space. Or that the amphitheater, you know, the buildings surrounding the amphitheater space might have a very different scale or character of the arch than they do on the street front. I mean, that's just an example. I think in plan, as I mentioned before, I think that that begins to break up the scales more effectively than it's currently doing on the elevation. But I'll stop talking so let some other people speak.
Well, and Lisa's comment too about maybe the misuse of the arch or the vault. I think it's a bit confused at times, like particularly in this image that we're holding for a while. I don't think it's your greatest image because it just indicates how confused the uses. It's both fenestration and attempting to be a structure. And then when you show a plan, it also becomes like a geometric motif for landscaping. Like what do you think the arch or the vault should do for your project, Edwinson?
I do believe that it should serve as sort of this mode of like the mode of like in the mode of experience, right? Is not it's I would like, you know, the main goal of the project was really to use the arch and the vaults to sort of explore exactly like, you know, how can I start using this to create like, you know, to incite incite different feelings, incite sort of like
That's where I think then, like, you know, and maybe I'm sorry if I didn't go to the concept board that Teddy linked to, though I'm trying to, you know, saturate myself with your images. That's where I guess either speaking to the specifics of maybe Echo Park or other precedents where arches in the public realm or vaults in the public realm begin to operate very specifically on the public would help. Like you look at a city like Bologna that is, you know, full of arcades. It allows like the interior of a shop to kind of enter the street and a building to essentially cantilever over a sidewalk, if you will, right? And so it really starts to blur the lines between a street edge and a sidewalk edge. It's pretty dumb. Like that might be one way to think about the perimeter of your building and even the interior perimeter of your building as it relates to this anti-amphitheater, which I'd also love to hear more about. But it seems like you got carried away with the arch more as a fillet. So I think you're kind of maybe, you know, misusing like the structural term for what is really a graphic motif, which is also fine. But it would be interesting to know more about the way it's coded and how it begins to play with color, or as Lisa was mentioning, scale, to yield different, you know, qualities of program. I particularly love your section axonometrics. I think those are actually really beautiful. Maybe you could go back to some of those, because I think that's where I would begin to think, especially a project that is about, I wrote it down, becoming a community hub for all users. Like I would expect this type of section to also incorporate the street and an adjacent building and really start to speak to how your building is you know, integrated into this this neighborhood, which again, like I know very little about. So I'm also leaning on like your analysis. But maybe my last question would be, would you mind expanding on the term anti-amphitheater? It's really provocative, but I still don't know what it is.
So in a way, you know, it still has the ability to serve as a more formal amphitheater, right? As you could probably see here with the sort of seating situation. But because amphitheaters are usually situated in a way that it's supposed to be directed to one focal point in design, the idea of this amphitheater here is would be better situated. Let's see if I can find that picture. Or actually fine. As you could probably see here, it's not, it actually circulates down into the ground. So, you know, there's not necessarily a particular point of which any speaker would need to be at. It could be on any one of these platforms. And simultaneously, the fact that this amphitheater works closer to maybe even a public forum, if you will. To allow for, you know, either speakers to be in any position and listeners to be in more than that seated position of the regular amphitheater seating. Another reason as to why, you know, my residential block is also sort of like, you know, coming above the amphitheater itself is sort of to create this sort of a sort of shell, as well as to allow for even a larger audience as well. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I think that's a far more eloquent party for your project. I think talking about the way in which you've designed an amphitheater that has an unoccupiable center that could then potentially atomize into these fragments of building types. I think it just seems a little bit more coherent and maybe less, it doesn't require you to kind of lean on a very specific geometry or form. It might kind of loosen your project up to maybe speak to the differences in the demographic that you're trying to entertain. But I very much appreciate that explanation. Thanks.
Okay, I agree. I'm gonna jump in here because I tried a couple times and people just, kind of went on in. So I'm Elitris Harris. I wasn't here when Stephen called my name, and you still can't see me, but I'm the Vice President of SoCal NOMA and a wonderful friend of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Slap my hand. Yes, Stephen. I'm dealing with both schools, so bear with me. And I love this studio, and I loved coming to your finals. And so I want to speak to a little bit of this project. I really love the project and plan. I do wish you had walked us through exactly in plan where the different elements are. I think kind of guess in elevation where they are, but right now I'm looking at this plan on the ground floor, and I love everything about that. It is open enough to be an interaction with the community. The bridging that you talked about can absolutely happen here on the first floor. There are some wonderful ways to interact and get onto the site. You have explained to us that you have connected to the farmers market, something that's near and dear to Echo Park. And I see that there are other vistas and ways to get into the project. So I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate the project is uplifted over the ground. And you can see that in, some of the sections and axons, if you would go to those. And you can see that it's very airy and light, making this a wonderful place for the community to even crisscross and interact with. Whether they're there for the hotel or the boutique hotel or the offices, they can feel welcome. And I do believe that you can do some of the bridging of users that you talked about, but you didn't show us how that might be able to happen. And in plan, like I said, I could not ascertain where each aspect of your programming was. But when you go to that famous 3D drawing that you have, keep going, we can begin to see the different elements. I agree with everything that has been said about the arches. And if you can go to that final rendering that you had, yeah, this one.
Or is it
back one more, this one. You can begin to see what the different aspects are, just knowing architecture. I guess I can see where the hotel might be and where the offices might land, and where the housing would be. But an explanation of that and helping us to walk through the project would have been amazing, to know which part was closer to Sunset and what that might mean to the project. Because the interaction and the intersecting with this local community is the #1 part of the project. And I think you've done that on the first floor. I'm not sure what happens when you go upstairs. I do agree. You fell in love with this idea of arches, and you have plastered them everywhere on your project. And I think they required a deeper explanation or understanding of, and mainly a connection to wherever you have used them. And I got lost somewhere in the vault. I don't know if we're saying the arches are a vault, or I do see some vaults on the upper and lower right side of this. I'm not sure how they work. Those areas look kind of dark to me. So, how does the lighting work under those vaults? So it's very important, if you're going to choose this element and name your whole project on it, that you really go deeper into every place that you have it, what people will feel like when they're there, how they move through these spaces. Do they have any significance for that particular program? I think that has been talked about, that may be used to delineate these different aspects. What did I say else? I think, yeah, I mean, I just wish we would have known, you know, where the elements were, and if you could have walked us through that at an earlier stage. Your comments, I think, will be better. I do love the amphitheater, or the anti-amphitheater situation, and it being a place where people can look down into no matter what's happening. And it looks like every single aspect of the programming does get to look down into this space. So I agree that that's the most romantic piece of your project, and leading off with that and how people would have felt, and or maybe how they get there, how they can experience, and then how like that would be the bridge for all of the users. So good project, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump in really quick and make a quick commentary, perhaps a wrap up on the Arch conversation, and then a material one that might have been missing. Actually, I'm very fascinated by your Arch game, and I would like to offer you a different reading on the way that you're using them. And perhaps if you, next time, if you wanted to introduce a project or for your portfolio, you could capitalize on that. So you would answer some of the Arch questions. I do believe there's some very fascinating and intriguing things going on. The way I see it, and now that we're on these images for a while, you have three kind of game going on. One is the add-on arches. I'm looking at your concept board right now that are in pink and yellow, and you're using them as this ad hoc element that you're essentially gluing them to your facade. The second one is a surface level treatment of the arch that creates this white facade, and it stops at the facade level. It becomes a surface level treatment. And then the third game that you're playing at the ground level is the vault game, that the arch becomes a spatial, for the only place in your design that it's not an experience of the threshold that we see the arch, we pass it and it's done. We actually get to occupy the arch. So the three, I think all three of the games are very apparent, very clever. I very much appreciate them. The question for your project is that how do you translate this sophisticated multi-layered game into your social political agenda, or a social political agenda for that matter? You're talking about experience, using arches in tying them to the experience. It might be helpful to look back at the precedent of the arches and the vaults. They're very loaded. They go cross continents, cross countries, and look and see how they have been employed throughout the history. We have the colonnades. I think Thomas mentioned it earlier. When you're passing through the colonnades, the experience is looking away, looking through the courtyards. You would never look above, so the above would remain flat. Your second arch game. We have the bazaars in Middle Eastern markets. You could employ it in your, I believe we do have some gallery and market elements that you would actually look up and get to occupy that three-dimensional game that you're playing. So the third game. I think everything is there. The foundation is there. You just need to sit in front of your project, do a close reading of all these things that all the strategies, formal strategies that you have, and then tie it back to your thesis, which goes beyond formal manipulations and games. The very fast one, I know we're out of time, material comment as well. In your concept board, there is a mini project. I believe that was a design exercise that you originally did. The tunnel vision, although it's very graphic and you're treating all those lines in a surface level manner, I do believe there is an immense amount of material potential that you could employ in relation to your arch game. There's this sense of depositing, there's this sense of things piling up on one another and creating arches. It has this earthy quality, and it would be wonderful if you could translate those now graphic ideas, potentially material ideas in your final project as well. So instead of this ginormous white stucco or structure, whatever, they could actually start seeing certain material implications of your thesis and your formal strategies as well.
Thank you. Jose, I guess you want to just run in a quick question and then maybe start the next group.
Super quick. I think all the comments that you received were amazing. I would feel very lucky to get all that feedback. The only thing I can add on to it is I think right now, just looking at these images, looking at the perspectives, think of them as kind of the final, as the end result of your project, but actually use them as tools to kind of help answer the questions that were being asked by the other jurors. So that would be my quick recommendations. Just saturate them, how people would use them, think about materiality, all the things that were kind of discussed earlier through these images.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
your hard work. Let's go to Ella so we can catch up some time.
Okay, give me 1 second. Hi, my name's Ella. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so my project is called Pipe Dream, and it's a mixed-use residential and commercial center, which focuses on flow and connectivity. My first goal when evaluating the site was to locate the private and smaller scale spaces away from the junction of Sunset and Echo, and to push the commercial towards the front of that junction. I also noted
play full screen.
Oh, is it not? Sorry. Is it showing full screen now?
You might just need to play the show. Is it like a PDF that you've got here or a PowerPoint?
It's in Acrobat.
I don't know, just never mind. Okay.
Let me go. Apologies.
I think you're actually in the right place if you go to that full screen. Yeah.
Are you guys doing full screen now?
No, it's okay.
Don't
Sorry
worry about
about
it.
that.
Just keep going. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Okay, so I also noted at the site the presence of a farmer's market and an elementary school. The goal is to push the residential program back towards the elementary school and kind of create a cradle for that zone. Just thinking about circulation to and from that school and how children cross the street, all that, I wanted to push it back. And then I also noted the farmer's market, and my goal was to relocate it into a more dynamic and permanent environment so that it could possibly thrive outside of the confines of, say, a Sunday farmer's market. And I also wanted to establish some pop-up shops so that more small short-term commercial businesses could thrive and like sell some of their goods every once in a while. So then I started, once I zoned the program, I drew major circulation pathways and created nodes of social gathering and rest at their intersections. From this, I began to use circular rest spaces to carve into programmatic bars. And so I started to kind of create a relationship between bar and circle, where bar became the programmatic physical building, and the circle was used to carve out into the landscape and to create the outdoor gathering spaces within the project. And in order to distinguish program and commercial bars from residential, I created a break in the access that goes against the standard grid that I had been working with and connects to the residential bars. So here's my site plan. So on the ground floor, non-residents enter from the major entrances off of Sunset and Echo. They can choose to descend below the restaurant and grocery store which are located towards the front of the site right here, to a large circular courtyard, which can host pop-up shops, music events, and any community sort of gathering that could be happening. On that underground floor, the pop-up shops have movable walls and spaces that can be flexible and apply to different functions. And the retail is kind of all pushed towards the front of that site.
Apologies, I'm still seeing the first image. Or the
really?
second image. And I wonder if it's because you're sharing a window. I think it's best if you share your full screen.
Yeah, sorry guys. Here we go. Let me just do this. This is probably better, I hope.
Yeah, and then you can do the full screen too. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, thank you for telling me. Okay, yeah, so towards the back of the site, more intimate programs such as student and transient housing are raised 4 feet from the ground level to kind of create a visual break in circulation. And so if you see over here, number 5 here is transient housing, and it's connected to social services. And then on the other side towards the elementary school is student housing for youth, where there are micro units, and they have kind of a communal center with a kitchen, shared living space, all that good stuff. And in the middle here, we have a cafeteria, which is accessible to both communities, which is bridged between in the residential lobby that leads up to the upper floors. And there's also a daycare, which is accessible to anyone within the community. And then once you go up, that is where the residential, permanent residences lie. And also where the commercial breaks and the access happen, there is an office space and a boutique hotel. And then on top of that, they sit right here, where all the red that you see are where these circles have been used to carve out exterior social spaces or gathering places for the residents. Okay, so this mixed residential plan supports multi-generational housing by attaching studio units to family units. This allows for flexibility in housing relatives, unruly teenagers, or taking on a tenant for passive income. This is a standard housing block, which the goal is to integrate high income and low income housing so that there's less of a financial separation within the housing and everyone kind of gets to know each other as neighbors. And then the outdoor and interior spaces between that are meant to foster more of a neighborhood type feeling. And you can see in this section, this begins to demonstrate the function of the facade and the pipe, which is the namesake of this project. The primary structure is concrete with the second floor bars being supported by steel trusses. The pipe is rooted in the commercial space and weaves around the building continuously, where it acts in many different ways. So the pipe's journey, as it moves from the commercial space, it is very irregular and larger. And then as it moves and weaves towards the residential space, it starts to become more regular and homogeneous. The pipe has many different purposes. It works as a mullion, a function for light, a railing, an edge condition, an overhang, a parapet. It acts as columns. It's a bench, it's a casement, and you can see its interaction here with channel glass, which is very much focused towards the social spaces and also in the commercial space. And here in this chunk model, you can see a little bit more on the commercial area, how this pipe starts to frame the facade of the building and how it starts to move back towards the residential areas, and how it functions at smaller scales as railings and larger scales as mullions. And yes, here are some renderings just to get a better idea of how the experience is, and that is my project. Thank you for listening.
I guess I'll start again since there's a bit of a pause. Thank you for your presentation. Sometimes this happens in projects where the very thing that's the strongest is also the weakest in a design. And I'm going to suggest that that is probably the case here, which is your concept of the ribbon, which I do think is a strong idea, and it helps bind and unite the different pieces of your project together and gives you really a rationale, I would say, for the way it formally developed. So it's a strong element in the scheme. In some senses, it's too strong, because when we look at particularly the renderings at the end, it's incredibly homogeneous and works to bind the buildings, but doesn't yet work to help create spaces at, I would say, the human scale. So you've made places in between your the different parts of your, this is more like a single building scheme, I would say, rather than a multi-building scheme that we saw with Edmondson. But you do have a series of open spaces between, in gaps of your building. But I'm going to suggest that they're scaled more to that of your big ribbon rather than to how one might actually occupy them. So even when you have, silhouettes or people occupying the space, they feel quite in like an alien environment, I'm going to suggest right now. And I feel like there is potential in this ribbon to really break down the scale or start to work with the ground plane or create smaller moments and really like peel apart almost as a way of breaking down your facade edges to begin to animate these in-between spaces, which right now are pretty like similarly scaled. In other words, they're all quite large, and we don't get a sense of a lot of differentiation or variety among them. So to me, it's a good beginning or a good midpoint, I'm going to say, of your project. And it feels like it still has another halfway to go to kind of fully flesh out some of the aspirations of the scheme.
For me, I'm going to go like a little bit in the opposite direction, where I think you can also use the ribbon to actually start to think about the different floors as a way to begin to kind of connect spatially from one floor to the next, and vice versa, versus having the typical stacking of what the buildings can kind of do. I think for me, that's kind of another potential at a different scale of what the ribbon can do. But yeah, right now the spaces seem, those in between spaces seem pretty vast, right? And it feels like you're in a sci-fi space, which could be amazing on one end, but even just using the ribbon to kind of articulate, like Lisa was saying earlier, the ground plane or the kind of ceiling up above would just make your project that much stronger.
Can you zoom into the upper right-hand corner? Yeah.
The plans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna go back. Oh, too far.
Nope, this is it. Yep.
Cool.
Okay. So again, I think this is another project where the first floor, at least for me, for the ground floor, is very successful. I'm not sure what happens after we leave here, but on this level, I feel like that there's a bit of success here in that you are engaging this block within a community. You seem to have addressed all of the places where there's already something happening in the city, whether it's a great place for traffic to come into the site or another place for people to walk onto the site and to begin to experience it. So I feel like that is a success. Now, as far as the ribbon kind of overhead of this, in the least the two areas where I see dotted lines, I'm not sure what happens under that, if there's some kind of place for there to be a ceremony or ritual or some experience that a person would have, because they are coming to the site and it's this open air thing, and then all of a sudden they're kind of enclosed in this area, and I'm assuming that those dotted lines mean that that area happens directly on the second floor. So I'm not sure how high that area is. And maybe it wanted to be open for 2 stories to maintain the wondrousness of the light and sun and just area and activities. So I'm sure that's shown somewhere in section. But from this perspective, the upper right, where that seems, I think that is where the school is, and sort of number 12. Let me see if I can see, because it's kind of tiny. What's number 12? Yes, the playground area. And so I feel like immediately, you know, that's open, I'm assuming, to the public. I don't know if it's the playground area for the daycare and now it's closed to the public, but the concept of at least what we can see here is that there are these splashes of area that the public can interact with. And I'm not sure where this new farmer's market is. Let me see. Is it number 14? No, it's number 3. Yes.
Yeah, that was something I actually was not able to decide exactly where. The hope was to give multiple opportunities for spaces that the farmers market could occupy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in lower right, and I'm on the site plan, I see some kind of circular stairs into where I'm assuming we entered this ribbon. And I think like the placement of all of these things and the interaction with the community was very successful in that you did that. But I guess I agree with others that I think from this ground floor, I didn't realize that it is almost a solid building that covers the bulk of the site. And it looks like they can move through the whole thing without, at some point, is this what floor is that? Where it looks like it's just one whole homogeneous building?
That is the 3rd floor.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with a little more work. I didn't get the ribbon thing until you guys started talking about it. So I'm not sure if I missed that part of the presentation or what, but I think overall, like for me, this first floor and the community interaction, and I'm going to assume that the functions of each of these individual parts to the project are sort of in place. The plans are tiny, so we can't really see them. And that also agree with everyone else. It seems to be a lot of open space that's unaccounted for with programming and functions. So rethinking that and really, you know, giving those spaces either a function and purpose, or, you know, figuring a way to take them out. There's always ways to have open spaces in between. These other floors could have looked anything like the first floor and with these different parts, but they could have been connected by bridges or something like that that would have helped you to continue to define this ribbon aspect without it actually being a part of the building and being a part of all of this open, unaccounted for space that seems to be represented here. But thank you for the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of notes. I think the project would really benefit from being redrawn and redesigned through an unfolded section. Seems like the form itself at times wants to rely on like gentle sectional transitions, so that you're not describing your project as 4 or 5 discrete levels, but maybe more through some kind of slope conditions that might allow you to I don't know, bring the exterior in more. I think for me, that's where, as far as representation goes, you know, the sections as shown seem to describe a very different project than what is described. But maybe you could also touch on, you seem to have, maybe more so than the previous project, an attitude towards like a representational style that is, I'm also looking at your concept board, maybe drawn from comics or kind of a graphic novel language. Maybe you could touch on that a bit.
Yeah, actually, thank you for noticing that. I have a big interest in comics. I definitely, I was hoping to do a comic based on this building, but I never really got around to it. So I think I'm hoping to explore that more in the future. But I would definitely say that this year, specifically in LA Metro, I've really been trying to like grow my graphic style and my ability to portray information and like kind of have a story thread going on through it. Yeah, so I think the issue now is creating a story out of the space, and maybe perhaps starting with the story before moving on to the space would be beneficial to that process.
I would also urge you to, you know, think about how the graphic techniques required to create a comic or create an architectural drawing could also assist you with the design of your project. To maybe not think of a drawing as something that's purely presentational, but rather something that would, you know, aid you in forming a project that is, you know, more in keeping with the representational style.
Don't know if Jose has a
No, I
statement.
yeah, no last statement. Thanks, Stephen.
Oh, okay. I mean, if I was going to say something, great comments from the jurors. Appreciate it. I think your plans are really, as Latrice pointed out, are working on actually so many interesting levels. On all levels, actually, even in the parking level on the way up, and how you move through the spaces and what you're creating on the housing levels, and particularly on the ground level and the sensitivity there. I think the question that I guess Lisa began with was really about development on the elevational level and sectional level. And I think those, with more attention and time, you could answer a lot of these questions about how you start to break down the qualities of this building. How do you enliven that ribbon so it's actually exciting, as opposed to a little bit scary, I think, for me in the renders, because it's just sort of, you know, so I think it's just really about development and focus. And so I really appreciate the effort. And I think the way you got through these plans is really something very, very powerful. So congrats.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your comments. Very much appreciated.
Okay, great. Let's go on to the next one. Jiwon.
Hello. Thanks for taking the time to join us today, and I really appreciate it. So my name is Jiwon Jung, and here is a simple diagram for my project. I want to briefly talk about my thoughts behind the concept. While today's urban density keeps increasing, I think the density of human relationship is decreasing, if that makes sense. Especially COVID-19 is even more distancing, not only the physical distance between individuals, but also the psychological. So I think this phenomenon caused the dangers of increasing social rejection, growing impersonality and individualism, and the loss of sense of community. And also, I think it prevents people from effectively socializing, which is fundamental human need. Therefore, through this opportunity of designing mixed income housing, I explored how different individuals with different background can be connected in the same space. Posited by post-structuralist philosopher Deleuze and Guattari, DNG, in the 80s, reason theory was explored as a philosophical framework to describe the relationship and connectivity of things. So there's no single answer, but in my understanding of their reading is rhythm is a diverse network and an organism that cannot be pinned down to the hierarchical top-down or vertical way of organizing reality. So the project Rhizomatic Community explores the possibility applications of rhizomatic theories in mixed income housing located at Echo Park, Los Angeles. And I try to think of principle that DNG suggested throughout the project. And here are some initial studies with different strategy, and this is the selected one. I want to explain how I discrete the unit here. To ensure the theory's formula, living units are non-hierarchically clustered into a total of 4 residence community. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each community has all different type of housing, from micro unit to transient house, and even to 3-bedroom unit for high income family. People will share all the amenity and common spaces regardless of their income. And there will be the community courtyard between in the each community building, and this necklace shape of tracks will be connecting. So to more explain about the necklace shaped track, another principle of the theory was connectivity. Connectivity is achieved through necklace shaped track, and the track connects all the program, including 4 communities, public service, and offices, spreading out in many directions and letting people constantly move. It creates a living network with different interconnection between levels, program, and people. Also, the particular shape of the track provide equal access from everyone, both from inside and outside. Therefore, it acts as an architecture tissue to reconnect all linkage between individuals. Here's a ground plan. Parking entrance is on the Echo Park Avenue, and public market, retail, gift shop, and pharmacy is on Logan Street, and restaurant and hotel is on the Sunset side. And I want to point out the program in the center, amphitheater. Amphitheater is where everyone can be entered, and it can be entered from many different points. It is connecting all spaces from ground level to underground parking, and even the elevated track through two ramps located here and here. Moreover, people can socially be connected through public events. And I want to explain about the entrance experience. You will enter the building through basically 2 thresholds. First of all, like the gap between the building is the first thing, and then each building's main entrance are located on the inner side of the park, inner side of the building. This will make you enter a park first before the building, and this is allowing more interaction with another residents. Yeah, and here's some renderings of the amphitheater. On the second floor, I want to point out there's a daycare center, social service centers are located on the center. The third floor is where the public path starts. To maintain and improve people's health, adequate open space for both recreation and rest is located. And specifically, open space are for group activities, sport, and any other activities that everyone can enjoy together regardless of their income. And as an example, there's a climbing wall here. And finally, fourth, first plan, I want to explain about the location of the co-leaders and community courtyard. The co-leaders are facing inward, maintaining privacy in the houses and allowing more community involvement in the connected courtyard space here. And there's this is a residential building in here, and then this is the courtyard space located on the office building. And here's a parking space plan. This is the view from Echo and Montana. And here's an entrance for the parking space. And here's sections showing the relationship between the sunset and the Montana. And it is, you can see it is natural leads to the amphitheater space. And then there will be some acoustic panel above the amphitheater. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always wonderful to hear a student have the concept, the social political concept, and being able to tie it to formal agendas and geometrical maneuvering. I very much like your plan drawings, and I'm very much intrigued by your circulatory system. I think the whole, the system of interaction between these actors and occupants of your small community is very sophisticated, and the sophistication comes across in the drawing. As a whole, as a project, I'm a little bit torn. Part of me really likes your strategy. The other part of me wishes it was the opposite. And I wonder if there is a mediation between the two. This whole circulation system, circulatory system that you have created that is very sophisticated, that is multi-layered, that is drawn beautifully, that the more you zoom in, there's more to discover. When you look at the building at large, if the building was real and built and fabricated, it's all buried. So there is this simulation characteristic going on with your circulation that with the more, as long as you're standing outside of the building, you would not be able to see it. You would not be able to have an understanding of this whole systematic way of interaction that you're introducing. Part of me really likes it. It's a kind of a project of a box project, and then monster in the box, you have to cut the box and see the heart of a monster. The other part of me wonders if there is an approach that you could retain that introverted characteristics that you have right now, that you have a box from the outside, and then it requires you or the audience or the participants to go inside and experience it from the within. So what happens if you retain that characteristics from certain point of view? There are certain angles that you're standing on the street and see the way as is. And what happens if you're walking around the building? There are moments that your introverted buildings opens up, and there are glimpses from the happenings inside. There are glimpses from the network that you're introducing that kind of entices the audience. There are two ways of going, multiple ways of going about it, two ways I can think of very quickly at the moment. One is to literally open up the building from very chosen, privileged point of view for the audience in the context for us to be able to see that network of circulatory interactions. The other one, which it seems fascinating to me, would be to have those systems starting to seep out of your building, turn into ground articulation, and literally bleed out and become a circulation around the building as well. So the experience is not just this hermetically sealed experience of being within your community. The experience starts from outside, you walk around it, and then you will go from underneath, and then you will come up, which is the experience you're providing right now, but it's very much contained within the box. But there are many comments. I let other people talk. There are material comments as well, but beautifully drawn, and congratulations to come up with a concept and execute it in an architectural level.
I'd like to pile on to Zara's comments because I think it's, congratulations, I think it's an excellent scheme, and and just really thorough and carefully considered from the very beginning. I love your program on the residential housing units, splitting the site, and also that gives a purpose, I think, to bring people there on a 24-hour, 7 days a week basis. So you have an inbuilt population to the scheme, which is supported by all your in-between spaces. And I do think you have a really fantastic variety of in-between spaces happening on the site. I particularly love the first and second floor, to be honest. I don't know if you can zoom into those at all. But, I'm old enough to know about Deleuze and Guattari a little bit. And, when they talk about like the smooth and the striated kind of spaces, I think there's a couple different kinds of things that want to happen. It's not just about flowing through the site seamlessly, but also about the kind of disruptors and moments of pause and serenity within that. And I feel like one of the things that your upper levels, the third and fourth floor, are doing is it's kind of become a literal description of movement, I suppose, and with a little bit too much movement, maybe a not enough stasis. And I wonder, I think this is what Zara was getting at too, but do you need that? Do you need those enclosed pathways beyond wanting them formally in the program of the scheme? And I would argue that you might not actually need them so much. I think you've done amazing work with the sophistication of the buildings around them, how you Boolean them and articulated basically everything that's not black. That the black might be the residue of how those became created, but maybe now can go away. So maybe we can look at a 3-dimensional view, and really nice plans, by the way. I think it's difficult to work with some of these forms, but you've done it really well by allowing the bulb outs and the fillets and the Boolean irregular spaces to become the social spaces of the project. But can you go to maybe a 3-dimensional view somewhere? This one, and then yeah, there you go. So in here, I think I really appreciate the way that you're beginning to articulate the buildings with, again, the Booleans, and those become the transparent edges and the indicative of the social spaces, and all that's working really well. All these pathways that you have, though, again, I'm just going to repeat myself, but I feel like they are, maybe you only need 30% of what you have, if indeed it becomes that important to your scheme, and that the movement systems rather could be tied more to the rest of the language, I would say, of the project. But really nice work.
Thank you so much.
I think I became so engrossed in your story that I forgot to truly pay attention. But so if you can go back to the floor plans, which is always where I'd like to start, because they help inform, how you have interacted with the community, which is my big thing. I'm first coming onto this site, and as mentioned before, you have enclosed it, and people are intrigued about what is going on inside, because they're just these tiny little openings to get inside. And you have really made every single person, even the residents of this, for whatever reason, they come to the site, and the entries are on the inside. So they have to come in, they have to experience whatever is going on inside. So I think that is intriguing, in one respect. And so I get inside and I see this wonderful, kind of swirling situation. I have to navigate it and find out where to go. And I'm hopefully there's some kind of wayfinding and some delineation of where residential is and where it's not. But like I said, I was kind of engrossed in your story, so I wasn't paying attention when you were telling us where those things were. But I do love the fact that you have this sort of experience that people can have in the center. Now, I have to agree a tiny bit with pathways and things like that. As you were describing them, I thought they were great. But as I began to see how they were intruding on this this middle space, which I thought from this plan was open all the way up, but I find out on the second floor, it starts to be, you know, intruded into by these other elements of the project. So then I got a little saddened because I realized how dark it would be for those people coming onto the site. With immediately at the second floor, you have this floor covering everything. So there are aspects of it that is still open, and the light and the whimsicalness will still be the same, but I would have wished that there was nothing on the second floor in the middle right here. I don't know where you could have put that, but, and maybe that started on the fourth floor, somewhere where it was like so high that it wasn't impacting what is directly under it, which sadly to say is going to be quite dark. And so totally, you know, kind of dampens my idea of what that could be from this floor plan. So if you continue to go up, I agree with the romanticness of the project and all how you have laid it out. So I won't spend any time on that, but I kind of like the walkways. I think more so on the fourth floor, maybe you didn't have any on the third floor. I don't know how connected they are to your programming of these spaces. But as you get up here, it seems that these are a connector for all of these different, you know, pods, as I'm calling it on this floor, because they all seem to be separate. But there's a way to be connected to them and get around. So I think that is very romantic and could also be very functional for the users of these spaces. What I also love about it, and this is probably true on the third floor, and maybe they're not overlapping each other, so there's sort of some openness on each of these levels where they are still connected to the sky, that when you get up this far, is usually not as much outdoor space for you to get out and to catch some rays and to experience some things that are out there. But what I didn't see in any aspect of this project is where there is some greenery, some foliage. Where would the trees be? Why would they be out here? This thing is not covered. Are they going to be completely exposed to the sun? So investigating those things and bringing some natural elements into the project, a waterfall even, something that connects us with nature, because you have landlocked us, right? We're in the middle in this thing in the center, and I don't see any indication that there's going to be some vegetation and foliage and things for me to catch some oxygen from and to want to be out there. So how that can be included or even shown to us in the project, I think would have elevated it to the next level. But I do appreciate everything about the project, your presentation, and especially your story. Thank you so much.
Just piggybacking on that comment about just, you know, the lack of vegetation. You know, we look at this plan, you know, I think there's something very provocative about it, but it also is kind of confusing, right? Because I think the language that you choose to render these interconnected or kind of mixing spaces is one that we typically perceive as poché, correct? Which is fine. I think there's another version of this plan where those are, particularly at the ground floor, treated with colors or vegetation patterns. And I think you could easily, you know, render a Burle Marx-esque plan here. But it had me look more closely at your, at the way you just rendered walls. And I was hoping you might be able to speak a little bit more about the cladding of the project, because that's also at times inconsistently drawn in plan. And you even, I mean, of all the projects, you it looks like you detailed your facade. And so it'd be nice to understand more about, you know, your thoughts about the kind of double skin that you're suggesting?
Like some of the portion of the building is double skin, like you can see in the section, but I figure out how to do this portion of the building, but not all of the building of the cladding. So yeah, I need more studies on the facade. But the initial idea was I want to differentiate the facade and cladding system, like, and each community have different like and their characteristic. I think that was the initial idea, but I think that's the point I need to develop more after, like today, I guess.
Sorry, you broke up a little there at the end. What did you say?
Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I think my network is so like, yeah, definitely I need more like time to develop the cladding idea, but like the direction is I wanted to differentiate the type of cladding for each community to give more characteristic. So I think that's I will develop into that direction.
Well, I think, you know, that to me becomes, I think, well, it's kind of clear that that is something that is of great interest to you. I think it's also one of the most kind of architectural qualities of your project, and worth expanding on, and, you know, finding ways to incorporate envelope, you know, into these discussions about rupture and connectedness, and kind of relationships to kind of a natural environment. I kind of wonder if like skin is actually the next level for you.
And I'll just add at the kind of urban scale and urban form, I think in relationship to the previous two projects, I think yours kind of is challenging the kind of status quo in terms of, you know, the center courtyard and then the buildings on the periphery, that is actually kind of starting to kind of break that notion up in terms of a different series of scales. So I think at that notion of thinking about it at the scale of the city, and how it relates to the adjacencies, I think it's a great strategy, I think. I would just quickly suggest looking at, so there's a building here in San Diego called Horton Plaza, and it's actually being torn down at the moment by John Jurdy. And I think there's so many similarities in terms of the kind of alignments of what your project has. So I think as a way to kind of look at it as a kind of, both in terms of what its ambitions, in terms of what it's doing, but also as a critique in terms of what Lisa was saying earlier about circulation. It's almost similar to what you've kind of provided. So I would suggest looking at that project as a case study for this one in that sense.
Yeah, I would say I think it's excellent. I think John Jurdy is such an excellent reference here. I think, you know, we've seen a couple examples of like the atomized plan. I think one of the clearest parts of your project, Jiwon, is the legibility between your initial diagrams, which are kind of clearly programmatic diagrams, and the way that those decisions, right, and they're pretty straightforward, right? Like I'm going to quite literally atomize and carve up large square footages into smaller ones and then position them carefully on the site. You know, it's, you know, very much the way I think it's referred to as the Jurdy transfer, right? I think malls in kind of dense urban areas tend to get planned out by this architect. So I encourage you to look at that. But to also appreciate that, you'll need to kind of look at the way, you know, malls are laid out in a suburban context, and how symmetry is maybe one of the first things that tends to go when you you know, have to negotiate a denser site.
Is it Horton Plaza again? Horton.
Yeah, it's called the Horton Plaza, and the architect is John Jurdy. I'll send you a link.
Thank you so much.
I suppose in summary, I've always loved your project. It's definitely, I think, one of the strongest, and I've enjoyed watching you develop it. I agree with all the critics. I think you guys are really amazing, did a great job of analyzing the strengths and, in fact, the weaknesses. I kind of wish more attention got spent here in terms of your interests. I think your elevations are really quite thoughtful. And I know your project differently than everyone else because I've seen it in Axonometric and the Rhino, right? I've gone through it in my mind with you. And I feel like you somehow, by making these beautiful plans, the section is fine, but this aerial axonometric of understanding the eddies and the flow and the way in which you created actually, I mean, it was really quite nice that people pointed out, I guess it was Thomas also pointing out that you post-shade your open space to draw attention to it as a diagram, but in a way never got to let us see the beauty of that internalized space, which I think Sarah's point was great, that it needs to kind of come to the outside as well. And then of course, as Latrice said, please landscape it. Great project, terrific skills. You know, in the future, just because I have you right now and I can say it, I wouldn't turn to the philosophers to present my project. You might use the terms, you know, the idea of networking, the idea of 2D thick space, or as I think Lisa pointed out, smooth striated kind of conversations. It's okay to use their terminology. Maybe you reference it somewhere if you need to, but your project has its own sophisticated discourse, which you're articulating, and maybe you're using Deleuze to understand it. But I think if it wasn't such a great, fantastic project, it would derail the conversation quickly if someone wanted to, you know, fight with you on the philosophical meanings of your use of what might be considered a temporarily outmoded philosopher, as you know, within the discourse. So I just, when you go into thesis, an instinct for all of you will be to like get a little heady. You don't need to do that. You can use the terms, you can articulate the conversation, use your own voice. It's much more powerful. Great review, y'all.
John Jurdy's a great distance away from Deleuze and Guattari.
Right?
Ping, you want to go for it? We have one more.
I can go for
End of
it.
the session.
Thank you. Thanks for all the comments today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Wait, sorry. See. Share screen. Okay, can you see my screen? All right, I will put it in full screen mode. Okay. Hi, I'm On Ping, and for this project, I focused a little bit more on like interior like programming just to make it more of like an inclusive space. So this is like my low-rise housing project, and for the most part, the low-rise housing project was just focusing on like just like having a place for people who are like at risk for who are like mostly affected by gentrification and with subdivision. So it's just like a place for it's just like more so like a place for people to have a place to live, because property ownership is like one way to get up the economic ladder, especially in Los Angeles and in California as well. So that's what's kind of focused on. And then carrying that into the Echo Park project, I kind of like, at first I didn't really like focus on the dissimulation, more so on programming the site, like maybe a housing could be in the corner, and then like commercial spaces could be here, and then there could be like a social space. So these are like the 3 conceptual sketches that I came up with. And then carry on to mid-review, what I focused on was kind of connecting my dissimulation project, and then kind of like just laying out where the specific programs would be, such as like the first floor would be much more of like a commercial space, and then second floor was kind of like a creative office, and then third floor was like transit hotel and boutique hotel, and then fourth floor was housing. And then here is a section from mid-review. So this is the diagrams for like the final form of the project. So the outdoor spaces, there's like a kind of like a bridge for like the 4th floor of the housing. This project actually has 6 floors instead of 4 floors. And this would be much, and it's like to figure out like individual outdoor spaces for like each housing unit. And the housing unit, I placed it on the top 3 levels from the 4th to 6th floor, just because it would provide a sense of privacy for the residents. And then this commercial versus social is the reason why I called it like commercial versus social is because like this one is much more of like a place for people to kind of like earn money and to like make a living, whereas the social is just like to take care of people's like social needs and like personal needs, such as like the daycare center, and maybe like a kind of like a place for people to also learn and learn about like maybe the history of Echo Park, and also like provide a space for the community in order to learn. So for the ground floor plan, what I focused on was kind of like having a bit of like a sunken amphitheater in the center. So I figured that after like the pandemic is over, there probably might be a need for more outdoor dining and maybe a place to sit down and eat and gather with people. And I don't know, maybe an event, hopefully another pandemic doesn't happen, but should it happen, at least there's that kind of an option. So this is like kind of a market / grocery, and this is like more of an empty retail space. And this one is like a lobby for all the residents in order to get in through. And then this is like the social aspect of like the project, like daycare centers, and then office and like social services, and like offices for maybe like counseling and such. So the second floor plan is like a gallery, much more of a gallery for this part, and like an exhibition, and maybe, and also like a multi-purpose space. And this is creative office. So the creative office doesn't have the traditional open office floor plan, because I think I read an article saying that there might be like 4 new floor plans ideas, because like the open office isn't really the ideal plan anymore. And plus the new floor plans after the pandemic for like offices will probably offer like an experience that you can't really get on Zoom, such as like maybe a place for you to maybe like, this is like a place to work, and then this is like have a place to socialize and talk to your colleagues. So the third floor plan, this is the boutique hotel, and then this is the transient hotel. So the reason why I placed them together is because I think that having the boutique hotel and transient hotel together would kind of break the stigma of how people, especially like those of white collar backgrounds, would perceive homeless people, and maybe like just seeing them like trying to get through their lives would probably make them want to engage with the community, engage with them, and like this bridge kind of serves as this function. So the fourth floor plan, this is the transitional family housing, and then this one is like just typical housing, like low income to high income housing over here. And then fifth and sixth floor plan is also just this as well. It's just mostly housing. And then this is like a section taken from here, and it's the one facing, I think it's the one facing Echo Park Avenue. And then this was the south elevation. And then this is the wall section detail. And that's the end of my project. Thank you for your time once again.
Can you go back to the elevation?
Yes, it's a very simple elevation.
You might have described this already, but just really quick, can you kind of explain the initial concept, the notion of the single family detached house, and how does that apply, let's say, to the elevation that you have right now?
I would say that just mostly inform is how it's like kind of like applied there, but also that the first floor of the family housing unit is much more like open and just a place for it may be like anyone to invite their friends or family members or to come over for a meal. And then the second floor is like a lot more private, where it's just like kind of like a place for you to sleep, and also maybe to just have your own space when you need time away from people.
Yeah, because I at least in regards to the housing, I would say maybe one way to kind of approach it is actually using that suburban model, right? There's a delineation of the plot. There's my rear yard, there's my front yard, side yards. And how do you kind of begin to interject that into something that's kind of multi-housing, you know, and it's a vertical versus something that's very horizontal in a suburban plan. I think to me, that was the part that, at least personally, where I got really excited, and it would have been really, for me, it would have been really neat to kind of see how that kind of develops through. And I do appreciate, at least again, in regards to the housing, the kind of intentions that you're trying to provide between, or the mixing, right? And kind of forcing stigmas to disappear in relationship to kind of program that's there.
I feel like you have really high aspirations, and took, you know, really, really seriously the kind of social project of the studio, which is a really good thing. But I also think that, you know, one of the things that architects have to offer to society is to become an expert in our craft. And our craft is about space making and being able to do something that other professionals and people can't do, which is to visualize and formalize ideas and aspirations in a really, you know, elegant and wonderful way. So you definitely have the aspirations, but I think we'll need to spend more time on honing the craft of architecture, I suppose, is where I would come down on this. Because with every part of your presentation, I think you really talked about the social agenda, you know, mixing of different populations in the transient and, you know, regular housing, the, you know, having open workspace and revisiting open workspace. And yet I haven't yet seen how that is architecturally manifest. I see a floor plan, but I don't think I'm really seeing like, okay, well, what does that mean to unpaint? Like, okay, how did she take it and create something new with it, or not even new, but just something, you know, resolved, I guess. And so I think it's really important to connect the two things together. Architects aren't going to solve social problems, right? And yet architecture certainly can foster and encourage and support a social agenda. But those things are different. And the way that architecture does it is by, again, the crafting of spaces and design to do that. And so our job is to really become experts and really do what other people can't. And I think it's incumbent upon us, definitely in a studio environment, to be doing that. So it's not about simply having the aspirations, but knowing then how to execute on them. And so my suggestion would be to take the latter part, you know, like just grab that bull by the horns and really wrestle with, you know, becoming and trying to understand, if you have an aspiration, a mixing of populations, that would be one in this plan that we're looking at here. And how do you make a set of spaces that allows for these things to mix together? It's not just putting them on the same floor plan together. It's creating a set of spaces where they, that encourages that certain social intermixing that you're talking about. And I would argue not separating them out on halves of the building or whatnot, but really thinking about it as a formal and architectural and planning proposition.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
With the craft, it's something that like I've been kind of like struggling with. It's gotten a lot better compared to like a couple of years, but there's still a lot more work to be done with that.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Lisa's comments, and I couldn't agree with them more. And I think this project, I mean, the potential is to invest heavily in the block or the module early on, so that when it gets replicated throughout the project, or in this case, just the plan, it's really rich and kind of overly saturated. So I find myself looking back at, I guess it was the first part of your semester project. Mm-hmm. Like the resolution of the kitchen, or the elevational vignette of a dining table and a sliding door and a staircase. It seems as though that your project had the potential to invest heavily in kind of the unit, and then double down on the hopes that that unit, once repeated many times, would yield an architectural conceit. I urge you to look at the orphanages of Aldo van Eyck and see if like that's something that that resonates with you. Like when you look at projects that are defined by a rigorous module. And I would then kind of extend that into the things that we as architects have to have control over, which are circulation, which in your project, I think the vertical circulation, particularly the way you draw a core block, is also lacking. Again, because there it's just a copy paste exercise, and while copy paste again could be a conceit, here it looks often like laziness.
I think that modular commentary is very productive. When you go back to revisit your project for your portfolio to refine it, you really want to go back to your initial design exercise and use those strategies and the bag of tricks, for lack of a better word, that you have developed to bring it and connect it to your social aspirations. Because I'm looking at your initial work and those little modules that you're creating. If you're into replicating, as Thomas mentioned, copy pasting, there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a sophisticated way of going about it, and there is the foundation for that sophistication in your initial design exercise, that puzzle piece language that you're developing. So if you bring those back and start introducing that so-called commingling of different groups and classes, you might be able to produce an architectural project that is capable of generating meaningful conversations.
Any final words from the group? I can always jump in on Ping. I've watched you develop on this project for a while, and I think probably your response to Lisa's points is honest, sincere, and appreciated. I think you know where you're struggling, and I think you actually came through with, I think, a simple project to manage some difficult challenges. It's not an easy program, and it's not an easy site. And there is certainly development to be had on the spatial programmatic relationships and the indoor-outdoor relationships. But I think overall, there are some clear and distinct moves that you've made that are good. And so, and I know you struggled even to work out things like exiting and work out things like, as I guess Thomas pointed out, like where the kitchen might even go. So there's so much that you've learned along this journey, and that I think making it comprehensible, which I think you were able to do today, is actually something I applaud, and I appreciate what you've learned along this road. And you know, we learn as we learn, and so I highly respect the effort. So thank you, and thank you, critics. That was really wonderful. Wonderful discussions all day, and I know that your time is your time, and I thank you so much for coming out here to be part of this with us.
I always love seeing the work that you do in your studio, Stephen. They're always such, and you said this is relatively small for you, which is true, and to me it's amazing how much students can accomplish over the course of the year and the semesters. Something at such a large scale, honed down to a very fine level of detail in most cases.
Thank you. They're great students, great faculty working with these great students. And we have a big team, and it's really wonderful having them all participate and add expertise. I keep pointing that over and over and over. It's a slightly different model of education which has evolved here. And I think it has enormous potential.
I'd second that. It seems, I mean, it's a very challenging studio, largely in part due to the scale and range of programs that the students are required to manage. And oftentimes I find in these mixed use studios that the architectural conceit or just, you know, a fundamental kind of concept tends to get lost as the project gets, you know, farther refined. And in several of the works, that, you know, it was clear that was you know, very important to maintain throughout. And I, you know, sincerely appreciate that and would encourage the students to never lose sight of what the bigger picture is for their project.
Thanks.
Detailing that.
With everything that's been said about the studio and about Stephen and your direction, thank you so much. I do agree with you. I hope that this is the last semester that they have to be working online, because it is quite amazing going to Stephen's final in person and seeing these, you know, 10-foot wall versions of these projects. And I think they have so much more ability to show than we get on these Zoom calls and on these concept boards. And just being in the space with them and allowing them to feel their space. They usually have models that they show us. So I'm fingers crossed, legs and arms with you that we are back in person next year, and agree that your students seem to always stay near and dear to architecture at its core, even though you always present them with this massive project that has all these different components that they need to manage. And they always seem to stay true to, you know, giving us something that's architecturally pleasing and acceptable and reasonable to have built. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much.
There's lots of fascinating ideas. I would only suggest that sit in front of your projects again and reread them and take some of it with you to work on them next year for the thesis. There's many fascinating things that can turn into a full-on thesis project. Congrats.
Great.
Yeah, and I would just like to congratulate everyone. I think amazing work. And I think what I appreciate from the 4 projects is the honesty and how they were presented. So that, I think, just keep going with that as you move through.
Great. Well, with that said, let's call it a mid-afternoon. We have one more session at 2 o'clock. Is it at 2? Yes. So we'll be back at it. So thank you for the critics. Thank you for faculty, students. Appreciate all the hard work. Have a great rest of your journeys out there. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.